Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation at Fibre Love Affair. Anybody, I'm not really sure how many folks are out there right at the moment, but if you have the ability to unmute to ask a question, that's okay with me. Open the chat so I can see if anyone has any questions as well. I thought that I would keep it pretty casual with this presentation. The first half or so, I'm going to talk a little bit about punch needle itself. It's been around for a long time, but a lot of people aren't really familiar with how it works. And most of the questions I get from people actually have to do with the mechanics, like the actual how-tos. So I found it's really nice to start with a little bit of background information just so that people understand what's happening. And then I'll go into describing a little bit more the products that I have. I have an Etsy store, and that's the store where I sell things to support punch needle artists or people who are wanting to give it a try or give gifts and that sort of thing. So after you kind of understand what everything is for, then later I'll go into showing you what I have in the store. Generally, the questions that I have come from people to begin with who maybe know about some kind of rug hooking techniques that either family members have done or they've seen at a fiber guild, or maybe certain types of things that they've done in craft classes in school. Basically, punch needle rug hooking is a really old method for making rugs, but it kind of fell out of favor in the middle of the last century. And people who still make rugs sort of the old way tend to be the makers on the East Coast. A lot of makers either on the East Coast in the States or in the Maritimes here in Canada know about rug hooking through the method where you use this little tool. It's a rug hooking tool. And when you're making your rug, you hold up your backing and you hold your either piece of yarn or strip of boiled wool at the back. And you're kind of working blind because as you are doing it, you put your tool down into the backing fabric, feed a bit of yarn into the hook, and then pull it up. And the maker then sort of makes the length of, or the loop on top of yarn or wool as long as they want it to be. And they, hundreds and thousands of little pulls later end up with the whole surface covered, and that's how they make a rug. So that's what we tend to call traditional rug hooking. And the one that a lot of people kind of bump into in school is called latch hooking. This was really popular in the 70s, and people got kits for this. With this one, rather than using a long continuous piece of boiled wool or yarn that you pull up from the back, this one uses little strips or little 2-inch to 3-inch pieces of yarn that are cut. The artist puts the yarn around, you go under and up, wrap the yarn around again. When you pull it up, you get sort of long tufts of yarn on top that look like a Rhea or Raya rug type method, if weavers are out there who are familiar with that, or just like they look like a shag carpet. And it's interesting that popularity of the latch hooking kind of coincided with when shag carpets were so, in style in homes in the middle of the last century. But what I do and the craft that I support makers in is called punch needle rug hooking. So this is actually a really old tool as well. It was developed before the turn of the 20th century. So in the late 1800s, the first punch needle tool was created. And so that rather than pulling loops up from the underside of the backing fabric, this one gets threaded with yarn. And I may as well just start by threading this for you, show you. It gets threaded with yarn, so you're not holding on to the yarn or the strip of fabric yourself. It comes through the actual tool. And again, instead of pulling up from the back, this pushes or punches yarn down from the top. And so the tool itself, this metal part of the tool, actually measures the size of the loop that then gets left on the other side. Hard to do holding up. I wonder if you can see that. So instead of the loops being on the top of your work, the loops are on the back. And people use this to make rugs all through the late 1890s and through into the 1930s. There was a really big rug making industry in the Appalachians in the US. And some of them were using the rug hooking technique that we know from the Maritimes, but a lot of them had started to switch over to the punch needle technique, because if they were making things on a large scale and actually working for a production company, then this is a much faster technique. When you do it on a big frame in front of you, it's easy to go fast. It's a little hard to hold this small one and go fast, but I'll see if I can demonstrate to you just how quickly you can actually get going. And that kind of speed was super attractive for people who were making them to sell. And I'm not really sure why this method fell out of favor with the Eastern rug makers who were no longer making things to sell, but making things for their own home. But for some reason, a punch needle type of rug hooking technique didn't come back into vogue until pretty recently, actually. So probably at this point, it's about 20 years ago that people started doing it again. And then in the, I believe in the late 1980s or so, a woman named Amy Oxford actually took the tools that she had found in auctions and that people she knew who were historians and so forth had in their collections. And she decided that she liked using the punch method rather than the traditional one where you pull up. And she developed this tool, which not only is very quick, but it also has this self-threading, easy threading type of invention where there's a slit down the top of the tool. You thread it and it goes very quickly. It's also a really nice tool to hold on to. There are lots of other types of punch needle tools out there too. Some of them I like a lot, some of them I'm not so crazy about. What it comes down to with the tools is making sure that it's not going to frustrate you. So there's another kind that doesn't have the quick threading method of the Amy Oxford, but it uses a threader tool, which is really just a piece of jewelry wire with a button on the end that goes into the end of your punch needle tool. At the bottom, you open up a little bit of wire, stick your yarn through it and pull it up. And that works the same way as, I don't know if they still do, but packages of needles used to come with tiny little needle threaders. It's exactly the same idea. It's pretty quick as well. The biggest caveat that I find in choosing a punch needle tool is that you want to be sure that the needle itself is made of well-machined stainless steel. There are a lot of less expensive ones out there which are fine for giving it a try just to see if you like it, but they are not very finely machined. They tend to have burrs on them. If they're brass, they're soft and can actually get damaged. Some of them can rust. So when I'm teaching punch needle, I always say there are 4 tools and 4 rules. So we've talked a little bit about tools, and I'll talk more about the different sizes of tools and when you might want to use what size tool to go with what kind of yarn. But the 4 things that you need are a punch needle tool. You need the backing fabric, which is called monk's cloth. And if I hold this still, you might be able to see that in addition to these holes that I created by showing you how to punch, it's also got a lot of visible space between the warp and weft threads. Maybe that shows it better. These warp and weft threads, they move around very easily. There's lots of give with them. And those warp and weft threads in the monk's cloth they're responsible for holding your yarn or your strip of fabric in place, because as you punch into one part, it moves the threads out of the way. And then as you go on and you punch right next to that, that thickness of yarn is going to push those warp and weft threads back against the loops that you just made. And that's what holds them in place. You can use different kinds of backing fabrics. Very traditionally again, for the maritime rug makers, they often used burlap or some other kinds of fabrics. A lot of those loose fabrics are not so easy to get anymore. They were used as sacking for grain or potatoes or different types of things before we put everything in plastic. And those were and are usable as backing fabric, but what they're made of really makes a difference in terms of how they're going to last. For example, with burlap or any other kind of hampered jute backing fabric, it's not finely milled before they make the fabric out of it, and it's very rough and can really fuzz up your yarn. And in some cases, when they're moving back and forth, can actually saw into the yarn and will cut the yarn. That's definitely something that people have to deal with when using that kind of backing fabric. So at this moment in this craft, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck getting this door mill backing fabric from one mill in the States called Door Mill. There are a lot of different types of fabrics out there in the market that are called monk's cloth, but what you really want is a fabric that has 2 warp threads, 2 weft threads in each weaving of the threads together to make the fabric. Some of them have 3, some of them have 4, some of them have 5. What happens then is that you get more backing cloth than holes, and you are not able to get your loops very close together because as you're trying to pack them through, you just don't have as many holes to push your yarn through. Okay, so we need a tool, we need the monk's cloth, we need something to hold the monk's cloth tight. This is a product that I make. It's just a regular bamboo hoop that you can buy at any craft store that a lot of us are used to using for embroidery. I stretch the monk's cloth super tight and glue it in, but it doesn't have to be a pre-made situation like that. There are lots of different types of hoops that you can use. And sorry to go out of frame. Again, if you're going into a craft store, you can find different types of hoops, probably in the embroidery section. Some of them are smooth on the inside. Like with an embroidery hoop, the surfaces on the inside of the outer hoop and the inner hoop are perfectly smooth, and that helps with pulling the fabric tight, but it won't stay tight because as you're punching, as you're pushing against that material, it becomes loose very quickly. So it's really handy to have something that has sort of a tongue and groove construction, so that when you put your fabric in between the two and you tighten it up and then you go to pull the fabric super tight, it gets caught in the tongue and groove. There's another type of frame that uses a grip mechanism. So if you can see here, this is actually a piece of, well, it's a frame, just like a regular artist's frame, but this thing that says Roberts on it, that's a strip of what's called carpet tack, and it's got lots of little nails that have been hammered in from the back, and they're on an angle, so that when you put monk's cloth over it, the little nails get caught. So that's the frame, just like the one I showed you. And you pull your monk's cloth up and over it until you get it as tight as you possibly can get it. And what you're aiming for is to make your backing as tight as you can get it. Ideally, it should be as tight as a drum. There's actually no such thing as backing fabric that's too tight. So anything that you can get to keep them tight is useful. My husband actually makes these for the store. We sell them in the shop, and I sell them with pieces of piping insulation that just fit right over the top, because those needles or nails that stick out are super sharp. So when you're working on it, if you have something that protects your hand as you're working, it makes a really nice method for using for a larger pillow, or if you're making a rug, for example. So, oops, things falling down here. And so the fourth thing that you need, so you need the tool, you need the backing fabric, you need something to hold your fabric tight, and then you need the yarn that you're going to use for your piece. A lot of people get into punch needle and they say, I bought a punch needle, what kind of yarn do I need to buy for it? The answer is it's really hard to give a straightforward answer. The thing that you are aiming for is for your yarn to flow free within your tool. We'll use this one. So many times you'll see that, for example, for the Oxford number 10 regular, which is the most popular needle out there, I would say, when you're looking at Pinterest or Instagram, the usual thing that you'll see, especially from North American makers, is that they're using an Oxford number 10. It's quite a big opening on the top. Sorry, just misplaced. There we go. So this is the Oxford number 10. You can see the thickness of the needle itself, the metal shaft that goes down the middle. And this is a laver 5mm, and they're about the same. They're quite thick. But you can get other ones that are quite thin. So this, for example, is a laver 4. And I think you can see that it's quite a bit thinner. And this one is the Oxford, this one here. This one is the Oxford 14 fine. So it's not only shorter, but the shaft itself is thinner. And what you're looking for, no matter which punch needle you're using, and this is true, by the way, of the really tiny ones that you can get, like the Ultra Punch, different very small embroidery punch needles, is you're looking for the yarn to move freely in your punch needle. So there is a tiny amount of tension, just so that it's not slipping out. But other than that, there's really, you don't have to tug at it. It's not bunching up. It's not so thin that it pools when you hold it up like this. And for anybody who's a knitter or crocheter, which I do neither, but my husband does, so I've been able to experiment with lots of different types of yarns. The thing is, you can't say bulky is exactly right for this needle, or worsted is exactly right for the smaller needle, because when you lay down, for example, if you had 6 different yarns that all said bulky on the label, and you took a little piece of them and laid them all out together, often they're quite different in thickness and fuzziness. So again, if you're a knitter, you're aware that calling something a bulky yarn actually means that the type of bloom it's going to have, like how much is it going to kind of puff up and be fluffy in your piece. Whereas with punch needle work, that doesn't matter as much. What matters is how the relationship is between the yarn and the punch needle tool. The other thing is with knitting and crochet, the tension is created by the maker. You either make things very tight and you kind of hold your yarn next to you so that you're having an effect on how well the yarn flows through your needles or into your work. But that's not true with punch needle. You have to kind of give up the idea of having any say in the tension. The tension is the relationship between the yarn and the needle that you're using. If you're using a very thin yarn, for example, this yarn is considered a worsted yarn, but I find it very thin as a worsted. I can often use worsted yarns in my Oxford number 10 or my 5 lavers, but it is too loose. It will actually just fall out. And if I go to try and punch with it, it is going to bunch up on itself trying to show you here, but it isn't suitable. Very quickly, it becomes loose. It can actually fall right out of the needle, but it doesn't mean I can't use it. If I love this color, I could just double or even triple the yarn before threading my punch needle with it. So that then, as long as I have a thickness that stays put in the needle, I can use this yarn. There are sort of general rules of thumb, like if you want to use an ultra punch, which is a tiny embroidery style needle, you would be looking at floss, embroidery floss. If you're looking at a fine needle, you're probably looking at worsted and thinner. If you're using a number 10 or a larger laver needle, you're probably looking at worsted and thicker. But beyond that, it's really just a matter of getting your tool and getting in there and giving it a try. And you'll very quickly see that if it isn't flowing through the needle and it gets stuck, it's probably too thick, or if it's pooling up and falling out of the needle, it's too thin, and you will need to either use a different yarn or double them up if it's too thin. I thought I would actually start a little project for you just to give you an idea of how things work. I sell kits in my Etsy shop, and one of the new ones is this one. It's this design, and it's called Laurel. And this is the one that is not only in my Etsy shop, but I've now been getting it into a few yarn stores for Christmas. They're selling the kits retail there. And I need to make one for an example for a client. So I thought that I would go ahead and start it for you. So in addition to the 4 tools that I was mentioning, there are also 4 rules. And one of those rules is let your yarn flow free. So we were talking about how the yarn really has to be just in that sweet spot where it flows through the needle and the tension is just enough to kind of feed it forward each time you punch a stitch. When we punch needle, I'm going to go ahead and start this one. I'm going to be using a gold. In this case, the one I'm doing is going to have a cream colored background, gold outlines for the leaves, and the inside of the leaves is going to be a forest green. So my outline yarn is going to be gold. And when we're punch needling, that length of the metal needle on the punch needle, that's what measures the size of the loop. We can either have a project that features the flat side, which is the side you're working on, or you can have a project that features the looped side, like this rug. So with this rug, this was the flat side. This is the side that I worked on, but I wanted the loop side to be the good side. That's a nice sort of squishy, loopy side. But no matter whether you're going to be featuring the flat side or the looped side, you still want all of your loops to be measured and even so that you get a good hold with that monk's cloth, because again, It's the warp and weft threads of the monk's cloth that hold your work in place. So with this project, in the kit, it comes with the pattern. And when you're working with a punch needle, it's pretty easy. You just put your pattern behind your work, whether that's a big rug or whether it's just a small piece. And you can hold it up to a window or to a lamp or something. And I just went around it with Sharpie. As you can see, it's not great. I just did it very quickly. It's not perfect or anything, but the whole thing's going to be covered with yarn, so it doesn't matter too much. People sometimes get worried about starting their projects because they don't want to mess up with putting the pattern on, but it will all be covered with yarn. So I'm just going to start by outlining this leaf, and you just punch your needle into the cloth. You advance just a small bit. In this case, I always tell people to start by measuring about 3 or 4 holes in the monk's cloth. And I only suggest measuring in order to get people kind of comfortable with a size, a good size for a stitch. After you've gotten comfortable with what the size of stitch is going to be, you can stop counting the holes. The 4 principles of punch needle are that your yarn has to flow free. You always punch your punch needle in all the way until the handle of the punch needle actually hits the monk's cloth. And again, that has to do with measuring those loops at the back. So some people get a little bit worried about that. But if you're not doing that, then you're not measuring your loops adequately. Your punch needle is directional. So I'm just going to pull this up a little bit to show you. You see how there's a wedge on the tip? Oh, it's thunder and lightning now. Okay. There's a wedge on the tip of the punch needle. Wow. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's pretty spectacular right there. Okay. So that wedge always shows the direction that you're going. So you're always going to advance in the direction of that wedged tip. So that means when you get to a part on your pattern that you want to change direction. So I'd like to now, I've done the outline of the leaf. Now I want to come up that center part. So rather than just moving my needle along like this, I'm going to, while my needle is inserted, I'm actually going to change the direction so that now it's going to be pointing in the direction that I'm going again, like that. Sorry guys, I can't see you now because something popped up. And that's true no matter what kind of needle you're using. If you have a needle that doesn't have the quick threading slot on the top, sometimes it's hard to know which direction you're going in. So what I always do is just put a little dot of Sharpie or nail polish, whatever you like, on the top so that when your needle is in your fabric, you can still see which way you want to direct it. So again, if I want to go that way now, I'm going to turn it and go in that direction, right? Turn it and go in that direction. So you always turn your needle when it's fully inserted into your fabric and then go in the direction that the needle is facing. As you are stitching, it's super important to just barely raise your needle above the monk's cloth. Sorry. I'm trying to both not see and go in the right direction at the same time. But if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm just barely raising it and then going on to the next stitch. If I pull it out, then because the only thing that is keeping yarn held into the monk's cloth is the tension of those warp and weft threads, especially at the beginning right now when there's very little yarn in the backing to kind of compact everything together. I'm going to have to make sure that I don't inadvertently pull it out. So pull my needle back towards the surface again, and I'm just going to barely pull it above the surface of the monk's cloth before I advance to the next stitch. No. I can't see anybody live, and I don't see any questions, but please feel free to ask questions if I'm holding it in a way that you can't see. So I've finished all of the stitches for this particular piece. One of the wonderful things about punch needle is that it doesn't matter if you don't have a big, long, continuous length of yarn. You can use little lengths too, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be just snipping it off. When you finish one section, you just cut it. And now I can go on to another section. Oh, thank you for asking questions. Is 100% wool yarn best? Any yarn is okay for punch needle, but it depends on what you want to do with it. So I would say that if you are going to make a rug in particular, and for some pillows, what you really want is something that's going to be long lasting. 100% wool can mean a lot of things. It can be a beautiful soft yarn that would make a beautiful sweater, or it can be a rougher, harder twist 100% wool that's made from sheep's wool that is tough and long lasting. And those are the types of yarns that you want to look for if you're making a rug, because you're going to be walking on it and it's going to, hopefully have years of wear. If you've gone to the trouble of making a big rug, you want to have it for a long time. Rug wools are, yes, best, and they will actually advertise themselves as rug wools. Here in Canada, Briggs and Little make great rug yarns, and custom woolen mills also make great rug yarns. They have a very different look. Custom woolen mill is a softer twist, and Briggs and Little have like a 3-ply and 4-ply twist to them. But they're both really long lasting and really good to use for rugs. Just about any other yarns can work for other projects. So if you are doing a wall hanging, if you like the yarn, use it. Often there are certain kinds of acrylics that have different effects that you really don't get in 100% wool yarn. And if you're looking for something sparkly or, nubby in a certain way that we might call it a novelty yarn, then that's great. No problem for using it for a hanging. If you're making pillows or, okay, if you were, where am I here? If you were making something like a Christmas stocking or a purse, something like that, that's going to get a lot of wear, I would definitely go with something that has a very sturdy feel to it. Yarn can, 100% wool yarn can be great. There are also some good sturdy blends like wool acrylic blends. Usually some amount of wool is helpful to make it longer lasting and less likely to get pilly and that sort of thing. This pillow, for example, is almost all 100% wool, but there were certain yarns that I just loved the look of them. They gave kind of a, you know, bronze shiny look, and I went ahead and used them anyway because I knew that I wasn't going to be throwing this in the wash, for example. It sits in a place in the living room that doesn't, you know, there's no animals getting to it or anything. And this is even, I just loved this sort of Russian blue color. And that one is a cotton yarn. And that one's very thin and I had to double it up to use it. But because I thought the color was going to be perfect for my project, I went ahead with it. So it kind of depends on what your project is and how much hard use it's going to get. So how do the stitches stay in place? Again, at this point, they're not really being held in place by much yet, but by the time the entire project gets filled in, you can see that at the back, the entire piece of fabric is filled with loops. And even if I pull them like this, there's no glue, there's no extra stitching. It's nothing but the tension of the warp and weft threads holding the work in place. This is something I worked on in early 2020, I think, when I thought that the pandemic was going to be over by summertime. And it is going to be cushions for our outdoor chairs. I kind of got discouraged because nobody was going to be coming over and sitting in my backyard and sitting on my chairs. But this is all rug yarn for the back. This is a custom Woolen Mills medium gray at the back. And then the colors, I just wanted really super juicy pinks. So I just went with whatever I saw that I liked, and again, sort of doubled and tripled them up. But you can see at the back here that this fabric, I mean, this is just fabric that's the same as I'm showing you here. It's just monk's cloth. And I literally just put it onto a frame like this. I punched it all, and it's been sitting in the closet. It gets rolled up, it gets taken to shows and things because I haven't finished it yet, and I can show people the process. But there's no way that any of this is going to come out because the warp and weft hold those individual loops. Once you get them, the whole thing packed with these loops, they just get like squished together, and those warp and weft threads like squish and hold all of the individual loops in place. Okay, so right, my question is, if my kids start picking at the yarn, will it come undone? It will come undone. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you that at this point, this could definitely get pulled out, just like that. And even this one that is completely finished and packed in, if I pull one piece of yarn out, it can come out too. But the nice thing about punch needle is that now this wonky old piece of yarn that really wouldn't be good for anything else, I can just put it into my punch needle. As long as it's about maybe 12 inches long, just so you can kind of pull it back and forth, right? That's that same piece of yarn that I just took out of here. Well, now I'm just going to go back in and I'm just going to fix it by punching the yarn in where it used to be. The fact that things can come out of the backing so easily, on the one hand, you can see that's sort of a downside of the craft, but I would say the fact that, for example, your kids would really have to be picking and pulling at this for this to come out. And so my usual caveat is it's no match for cats or belt buckles. But kids aren't usually doing much more than maybe like throwing them at each other, or making noise or scrunching them up. It's fine for that sort of thing. But if you've got like a very small hook on something, again, like maybe something on your clothing, or if someone is really trying to pull it out, it'll come out. On the other hand, it's really easy to fix too, because you can just take that yarn, snip whatever length has been unraveled, and just put it back in your punch needle and redo it. Thanks, Stephanie. It is an issue that comes up a lot when people realize just how easily you can pull things out of punch needle work. People get a little worried about that, and they want to put glue on the back. And I'd have to say that you're going to see lots of people, especially from other parts of North America and some parts of Europe, who do put glue on the backs of their projects. In most cases, that's because they cannot get this door mill, and it's specifically door mill because they're the only ones who make this 2 thread by 2 thread warp and weft. They can't get that fabric. So in some cases, they are using a loose weave linen, and when they are working with it, they can actually put holes in the linen. So if there's a hole in the backing fabric, it is no longer holding your loops in place, and it's easy for them to come out. So because they want, again, to be able to use that rug or seat cushion or whatever it is for a long time, they use glue. I don't recommend it. There are a few times, if you're making something like Christmas decorations or something, they're small, it doesn't matter too much if it gets wrecked. You'll just make a new one. Then, for example, finishing off the back by just, folding your monk's cloth to the back and gluing it to the back or something like that, then it doesn't matter, because it's probably not that precious to you. If you ever want to be able to fix something, then don't use glue. Do the method where you fill up the entire piece of monk's cloth to hold it in place. I cannot believe that it is already past 5 o'clock. I was going to show you so many more things about finishing punch needle work, and I do want to quickly show you some of the things that I have in the shop. I love talking about punch needle. I am doing a workshop out at Holiday Crafty Affair. If for those of you who are in the Lower Mainland, it's being held at the Harris Barn in Delta, and it is going to be, it's on November 27th, and from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And there is still space, so you could, if you're interested, you could come and take a workshop with me. For that workshop, you've got your choice of 3 colors of this project, which is called the Laurel, or 2 colors of this project. The frame doesn't come with it, but this project is called the Henry, and that comes in 2 different colorways as well. And you can sign up for those at if you go onto Instagram, it's @craftyaffair. And if you look up Scout and Company's website, Gina has the sign up for the class on that site as well. Or feel free to message me. I'm at Kussen and Kiss on Instagram as well. Or you can go to my shop, which is kussenandkiss.com or .ca. Both of those take you to my Etsy shop, and I chat with people there all the time about various things as well. So those kits, the Laurel Kits, the one that I was working on, they come in my shop in this kind of packaging. It's really important to me to have as many of the packaging materials be recyclable or reusable as possible. So you'll see a lot of them are in brown packaging. I sell toolkits that are great for getting started. They're also good for like beginners or to give as beginner gifts because they include a small version of either the Morgan no slip hoop, and again it's got that tongue and groove mechanism in it, or another one, it has the smaller tongue and groove hoop in it. But all of these kits come with enough monk's cloth to make 2 projects. They come with the hoop, they come with patterns, they come with full instruction booklets, and they come with the Oxford punch needle. So this type needle. My Laurel kits and my Henry kits come with my other favorite needle, which is the Laurel, and that's that one that you use the threader with. It's one extra step, but I make a really long threader so that they're a little bit easier to thread. The advantage of these laver needles is that they are adjustable. So again, we were talking about how the length of the needle determines the height of your loops on the looped side. And again, these things just go up and down. So you've got lots of choices of different lengths of loops that you can make in your work. I sell several types of beginner kits. I sell different types of frames as well. So in addition to the carpet gripper strip frame for larger work, I also sell pre-made smaller pieces. And these are an artist's stretcher bar that I have stretched with the Dormill monk's cloth, and they're really drum tight so that you can just take it, put your pattern on the back, and get to punching. I know that I need to tell you before the end of the class that the key word for this class is punch, and please be sure to check out how you can enter for the draw on that one. And I will just keep talking about what I have in the shop for the rest of my little time here. There's a question about what's the next step to make the cushion. So yes, absolutely. With a cushion, and I'll show you several of them here. So here's one. Oh, by the way, I sell PDFs of various patterns and also paper patterns of different patterns that you can make rugs or pillows and different things out of, or the stocking. Oh, I sell kits for making the Gracie stocking as well. That's this one here. And there are 3 different colorways, and all of the color combos are coordinated, so they look really nice together. But in terms of making a pillow, so you would punch your front piece, And then you would sew a piece of fabric, just the same size square of fabric on the back. And you do it like most sewing projects. You do it with right sides facing each other and just leave a little area and turn it all inside out. Put your stuffing in it and then maybe do a whip stitch at the bottom. Sometimes I like to make a zippered back, and I'm hoping that soon I will have the back pieces that actually have a zipper already sewn in them, so that you don't have to worry about putting a zipper in, and then you just sew that panel onto the back of your pillow, punched pillow piece, and you can either put stuffing or pre-made cushion insert into those. I'll show you just a few more of the, okay, so that's the Wallace. And so I've got paper patterns. You can get it as PDF. You can also get it as a piece of monk's cloth that has the pattern already drawn on, which a lot of people like to bypass the work of having to draw the pattern on. And I've got a few other new additions to the paper patterns as well. So I'm just updating those this afternoon. They should all be up and ready to have a look at by this evening. I also have a class. I don't know if anyone is aware of a school that we have here in the Lower Mainland called School of Sweet Georgia. I recorded a full 3-hour in-depth class with them if you prefer to take a class online. It is a subscription kind of a membership there, but you are, I think there's a lot of great stuff for weaving and knitting and spinning, dyeing. If you love yarn, it's a really amazing resource for that. My class there is all about punch needle, introduction to modern punch needle. We go into a lot of things in depth. If you like, it's perfectly okay to just go in, start your subscription. You will need to give a credit card number, but you can cancel at any time. So you can literally take my class and probably several other classes in the course of a month for under $30, and then you can stop your subscription if there's nothing else that you're interested in. So I thought I'd let you know about that because I always forget to tell people about it. To make a punch needle piece wearable, the finished piece gets appliqued onto a garment. Yes, you can use them as patches. You can make little, sorry, I had a brooch around here at some point, but I'm quite famous for exploding everywhere. Making a small piece into a brooch. If you go onto my Instagram account, on my main page, I have a tutorial for making brooches out of punch needle. And with that one, I used a fine punch needle. I just drew all of the monk's cloth into the back, quickly put a piece of felt on the back and stuck like a little jeweler's brooch pin on the back of it. It's really easy. It's kind of fun. Kids might like to do it. So again, it's just under those little round icons on your main page. So I'm hoping to keep adding different information to my website, and I'm hoping to get some YouTube videos together before the end of the year as well. I'm just really grateful for everyone for coming out and listening to me. There's so much more interesting stuff that I could be talking about with punch needle, and I love to do that. So if anybody is interested in getting in touch, talking more, having a look at what I have in my shop, I can help you through some decision-making processes and possibly some gift giving this year. So I think I've come to my end of my time. Thank you so much. You're welcome. All right. I see your eco there.